So continuing on with mitosis, we have the final three parts of PMAT. Okay, so if you remember from the last video, I asked you to remember PMAT, and that's the stages of mitosis. Okay, PMAT meaning prophase, and then metaphase, anaphase, and then finally telophase and cytokinesis. Okay, so just to quickly go over now, one thing that I want to mention is that I didn't mention in the last video, but you'll notice on top you actually have microscopic images of each phase. Okay, so going on to metaphase. Okay, one of the easiest ways to remember metaphase, the stage, is just think metaphase, the middle. The chromosomes are lined up in the middle, or the equator. Okay, the equator of the cell, or the nucleus. So you'll notice that the chromosomes are pretty well defined. Okay, they're pretty well defined. By their sister chromatids. So each one of these is a chromosome, and then you have the other half on the other end, and they've been lined up in the middle and prepared by the spindle apparatus. Okay, so that spindle apparatus has attached itself to those proteins, okay, on each end, and that spindle apparatus is preparing itself. It's preparing to divide those sister chromatins and pull them towards the poles of the cell. Okay, so you'll notice from metaphase being lined up in the middle to now the new stage, going on to the new stage, anaphase. Anaphase, away, being pulled away from the center. Okay, it's being pulled away from the center. So I'm drawing little arrows to indicate the direction that each sister chromatin is being pulled. Okay, so each of these chromatids, this one is genetically identical to this one, and so on and so on. So they're being pulled away from each other so that they can start actually dividing the cell. Okay, so once you go from anaphase to telophase and cytokinesis, you now have two cells that are genetically identical. Okay, so if you remember back to interphase, you'll remember that the genetic material was not laid out as organized as we have in these stages here. Genetic material is nicely packed, ready to move, and now you have that genetic material beginning to unwind and unpack. Okay, it's beginning to relax, and it's beginning to organize itself the way it looked back in interphase. And on top of that, you'll also notice that the nuclear envelope is beginning to reform. Okay, so again, that nuclear envelope is beginning to reform, and the genetic material is once again unwinding itself. It's making itself at home, if you will. And also, the spindle apparatus, the microtubules, have disintegrated and broken up. Okay, so now that the genetic material is making itself at home, and now that it's basically each of these are now being housed in their normal housing in the nuclear envelope, you begin to have the cell membrane itself. The cell membrane is now beginning to divide to make two identical brand new cells. Okay, and you'll see here this little formation right here. This is called a cleavage furrow. Okay, or just a furrow, depending, I believe your textbook just calls it a furrow. But you begin to see the division in the cell wall itself. Okay, now just to kind of point you back up to these images here, just if you'll take a look at this one, you'll see the metaphase, you see all the genetic material lined up in the middle, in the equator of the cell. Okay, and then you'll begin to see it also being pulled away in opposite directions. Okay, you'll see that spacing in between here. Okay, there's a space in between this genetic material on this side and the genetic material on that side. Okay, and then the spindle apparatus you can see highlighted in the green. Okay, well, actually I just drew around it with my blue pen, but it's green on the image. So, and then looking at the last telophase cytokinesis, you can see that there's a clear cleavage furrow there, and that cell is beginning to be divided pretty clearly. Now, if this was a plant cell, this division right here would be a cell plate, okay? Because you'll remember that there's a cell wall in plants. They don't just have the membrane, but they also have a cell wall. So that's the final stages of mitosis. So again, you have mitosis, and the stages of mitosis is PMAT: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. Okay, hopefully this has been helpful.